I recently was on a panel to talk about covered hoppers in general, and covered hoppers are important for modern rail capital, especially on my side of it as leading the sales team here and for capital employment, investment, and just leasing. Covered hoppers make up a big demand overall in the rail car industry, and we're at a unique inflection point in that we have record crops in corn and soybeans, and the supply is looking great. The railroad supply of service is looking robust. It's the demand side that gets to be more of the challenge and a bit of an outlier. So it's unique inflection given some of the headwinds we've talked about overall in the past related to tariffs. So we haven't seen a lot of the impact of tariffs looking backward, but now as we enter October and get into Q4 here, what do I think that means? And there could be more of a significant impact on that, especially for certain types of whole grains within the covered hopper industry. It's been a challenging 2025 from a new build perspective. I mean, capital deployment overall for all rail cars for a lot of reasons. I mentioned tariffs being one of them, no doubt. It's important when we talk about covered hoppers, we talk about their specific capacity and what type of commodities they're targeted to. That's a big part of providing you the answer. From a commodity perspective and a rail services perspective, there's been great supply. So I mentioned record harvests for soybeans and grain. That's happening now. And then the service by railroads has been really good. So year over year, looking at 2024 compared to this year, we're up on both volume slightly, driven a lot by grain right now, and we're up on service as well. So service has been good. Railroads have been doing well overall, and we've actually increased our share of volume so far. That's pretty much through August. Looking forward, grain shipments overall, even though they've been positive, there's a lot of challenge in the demand side of that. And a big part of that, what may dampen exports, really relates to soybeans. We're having strong demand, good price points right now because of that demand in wheat and corn. But we've got a big question mark on soybeans, so we can talk a little bit more about that. So that's softening the demand overall because of uncertainty. And that means uncertainty in the export market, et cetera, and uncertainty about tariffs, et cetera. We're competing more head-to-head with countries like Brazil and Argentina, and that's really impactful, and we can talk a little more about that. But I do see some unique demand for grain products, such as meals and DDG, dry distillers grain, as well as fertilizer. So there's bright spots, and it's not all dark for the use of 5,000 to 5,400 cubic foot capacity grain cars. I just think it's a little slower for those cars, and quite frankly, maybe paused as we get toward 2026. Overall, it's a story of hope. For sure, we've seen a lot of retirements of older equipment. This is the natural life cycle of cars aging out and the cost to maintain those cars, with new cars coming in that are somewhat more modern, more efficient, possibly with lighter tier weights or shorter, so you can fit more cars on a unit train, etc. Many of the cars that are been aging out through attrition were built in the 80s, so that's approaching their useful, productive, certainly economic life. And there's still room to run for their conversion of those cars to the larger grain cars. The challenge is because of lack of demand that the cost benefit of replacing those aged cars with brand new cars has slowed. Typically, I would expect that we'd have attrition of about 3,000 to 5,000 cars per year. But given some of the headwinds I mentioned, we're really at a much slower pace of replacement and that attrition. I do expect that it will grow as in 2026 than what we have today, but it's going to be at a much slower pace. So I think overall that the organic demand right now is more paused across the board for covered hoppers, other than the unique ones I mentioned in fertilizer and some of the grain products. Covered hoppers really unique, and the reason I like them and follow them and track them because it supports the grain market primarily, right? The grain and whole grains export, domestic use, as well as grain products. I think it's a great sign of the economy overall as one of the macro drivers. What I'm seeing is that many railroads were interested, as well as grain shippers, in bringing on new cars in 2025, but they put in thousands of cars because of what they saw was a very robust crop. And that's exciting. But it's that the supply has been there, true, robust crop, but it's the demand that's caused them to pause their new builds. So by and large, I've seen it across the board that the large railroads and others are not bringing volumes of new covered hopper cars into the market. I do see some change for fertilizer cars and some of the grain products, but those are not at the volume of the grain cars the thousands of grain cars that we're talking about. To mention one other thing, I'd mentioned soybeans, to give you some context on that, right? Well, of the billions of bushels of soybeans being produced in the U.S., half of those billions of bushels typically get sold to China, more than half in some cases. As of moving into October right now, in a minute, right, in this week, we have no contracts signed with China. And there's no current contract expectation in the future other than hope because of some of the discussions with TikTok and just open discussions with China that will be parlayed into discussions on grain and particularly soybeans to China. Right now, the demand for those soybeans are being filled entirely by Argentina and Brazil. We see investment from China in those countries. And I think that those trends of supplying so much from the United States may be challenged and have some significant headwinds because of our relationship with China. A lot of things play into it, though, the dollar, etc. So there's still hope. I just think right now that soybeans in particular could drag our covered hopper demand down and our export demand certainly down. Yeah, there's always risk, but there's a lot of hope in that the bill that was passed administratively earlier this year provided for continuation of a producer tax credit, a production tax credit PTC that was issued by the Department of the Treasury. It's called Bill 45Z. Don't really need to get into the particulars of that, but really what that is, it's a credit for those who produce biodiesel, renewable fuels, and alternative fuels. And what that means is it drives demand for ethanol, right? We see ethanol at the gas pump, and then that demand is stable right now and growing, quite frankly, as well as export of ethanol. And then we see the processed soybeans for renewable diesel. That's really been a big boon from this 45Z bill, from the producer tax credit. I expect that will drive demand. We're seeing a lot of expansion of new facilities being built throughout the United States, so that's exciting. It's just not as large on a macro basis volume for covered hopper demand, but there's really good demand, primarily driven by the tax credit and, quite frankly, the ability to get reasonably priced corn and soybeans here domestically. For sure, they do. They're a market leader, and they really have been converting to the shorter, lighter grain cars. They're better. The capacity is better for them. They can use them and put more cars into unit train to be more efficient. Railroading is really all about efficiency, right? Because that drives profit, et cetera, sustainability. Railroads, by and large, have had a really good run from an operating ratio perspective over the Class 1 carriers, and the revenue per ton mile has been really on an uptick for most carriers. So we're seeing some great efficiency from the railroads. They've really, so to say, wrung the rag and on the efficiency, and they're ready for more volume. The thing I get concerned about as an ex-railroader was that you try to always optimize your supply, your rail service with the demand. And if we see a downturn in demand for large volumes, billions of bushels of soybeans, et cetera, I would expect that the railroads would have to act in kind to match their service to that demand. So with the reduction in coal, reduction in some of the larger commodities, I hope that the railroads can sustain the service that they provided. It's been much more efficient. I expect to see them add thousands of covered hoppers in the future. This is the 5,000 cubic foot to the 5,400 cubic foot capacity cars. And that's really good for the United States. It's really good for the sustainability of the railroad. So I'm excited about the merger potential of the UP and the NS as an ex-railroader. I see a lot of efficiencies there, provided that the shippers' interests are protected. So a lot of things happening in the rail side. That merger is a big one, and we'll hopefully see more traction in the coming year in 2026 to see how that lands.